They said she looked just like any other little girl. Pink dress, pigtails, a small pumpkin bucket in her hand. But when she knocked on your door that Halloween night, you didn't give her candy. You gave her something much, much darker. It was Halloween night in Hollow Creek, a quiet town that always seemed to sleep under the weight of its own secrets. Every house was a beacon of light and fun. Glowing jack-o'-lanterns, spooky cobwebs, and children running from door to door, their excited shouts of "trick or treat" echoing through the crisp autumn air. But near the edge of the forest, at the very last house on Maple Lane, lived a man named Ethan Rowe. Ethan wasn't a fan of Halloween. He always said it reminded him of things best left buried, of memories that clawed at the edges of his mind. That night, he sat alone in his armchair, watching the storm roll in over the distant hills. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The lights in his house flickered nervously, and the candy bowl by the door was almost empty. He figured the trick-or-treaters had all gone home, driven away by the late hour and the worsening weather. He was just about to lock up for the night until he heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that seemed to echo through the silence of the house. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan frowned. It was nearly midnight. No one should have been out this late, especially not a child. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed and pulled the door open. And there she was. A little girl, standing on his porch, wearing an old-fashioned pink dress completely soaked by the rain. She was holding a faded pumpkin bucket. Her hair hung in perfect, unblemished curls despite the downpour, but her eyes didn't reflect the porch light. They were just dark. "Trick or treat," she said softly. Her voice was flat, almost mechanical, like she had practiced those words 1,000 times but never truly understood their meaning. Ethan forced a smile, an unsettling feeling crawling up his spine. "Sweetheart, you're out awfully late. Where are your parents?" The girl paused for a long, unnerving moment before replying. "They're waiting. For you." Just then, a brilliant flash of lightning lit up the night. For a split second, Ethan saw her shadow on the wall behind her, but it seemed to lag, moving just a fraction of a second after she did. He blinked, momentarily blinded, and when his vision cleared, she was gone. The porch was empty. The next morning, Sheriff Brody found muddy little footprints leading from Ethan's porch straight into the dark woods. There was no sign of the girl, and there was no sign of Ethan either. All that was left was his front door, still wide open, and a single, brightly colored piece of candy lying on the welcome mat. That's when the old folks in town started talking again, whispering stories about her. They said every 10 years, on Halloween night, a girl appears in Hollow Creek. She always wears the same pink dress. She always knocks after midnight. She asks for candy, but if you look too long into her eyes, she takes something else entirely, something you can never get back. A year passed, and the mystery of Ethan Rowe's disappearance turned into another of Hollow Creek's ghost stories. That is, until Mara, a journalist from a popular true crime channel, arrived in town. She was sharp, skeptical, and didn't believe in ghost stories. Her goal was to uncover the logical, human explanation behind the legend. But the locals' warnings unnerved her more than she cared to admit. An old woman at the general store grabbed her arm, her eyes wide with fear. "She's not looking for candy, dear," she whispered. "She's looking for what was taken from her." Mara just laughed it off. A tragic local legend, perfect for a Halloween special. She decided to test the myth herself. That Halloween night, exactly 1 year after Ethan vanished, she set up camp in his abandoned house. She had cameras, audio recorders, motion sensors, the works. She was going to wait for this supposed ghost and debunk the story once and for all. The old clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly, each second stretching into an eternity as midnight approached. And then, she heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound came from the front door, just as the legend said. She quickly checked her monitors, her heart pounding against her ribs. Nothing. The porch camera showed only an empty, rain-slicked porch, but the knocking grew louder, sharper, more insistent. Then, a voice drifted through the thick oak door, a child's voice distorted by the wood. Trick, or treat. Mara's journalistic curiosity battled with a primal fear. She took a deep breath, grabbed a heavy flashlight, and slowly pulled the door open. At first, she saw nothing but a thick, swirling fog that had rolled in from the forest. It was unnaturally dense, blanketing everything. But then, the fog moved. It parted, and from within it, the little girl stepped forward. Her face was as pale as candle wax. Her smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally across her face. And where her eyes should have been, there were two hollow, black voids, from which a faint, ethereal blue light seemed to glow. The girl took another step closer, her whisper cutting through the silence. You took what was mine. Now, I take what's yours. Mara let out a blood-curdling scream as her camera fell from her hands, clattering to the floor. The footage, later recovered, showed her shadow being pulled backward, stretching and twisting unnaturally as if it were being torn away from her body, before the screen went black. They found the camera, its lens still pointed at the empty doorway. But no one ever found Mara. Every Halloween since, the people of Hollow Creek claimed to hear it. Faint knocking, late at night, coming from the edge of the woods. 3 slow, patient taps, always followed by a child's voice asking softly, trick or treat. No one opens the door anymore, because they know that if you do, you'll see her smile, and you will never, ever see another sunrise again. So, if you hear a knock after midnight this Halloween, don't answer it. Because the girl who's asking for candy isn't human anymore. Have you ever heard that knock on the door late at night? The one that makes the hair on your arms stand up? You think it's just the wind, or the house settling. But what if it's something else? What if it's someone, or something, wanting to be let in? This story takes place in the quiet, sleepy town of Oak Haven, a place where everyone knows everyone, and the most exciting thing to happen is the annual Fall Festival. It's the kind of town where people still leave their doors unlocked, or at least they used to. Our story begins with an old man named Arthur. Arthur had lived in Oak Haven his entire life, in a cozy little cottage at the edge of the woods. He was a creature of habit. Every evening, he'd sit in his favorite armchair, listen to the crackling fire, and read the local paper. But one chilly October night, his routine was shattered by a sound he hadn't heard in years. Knock, knock, knock. It was a soft, hesitant knock. Arthur checked his grandfather clock. It was nearly 10. Who on earth would be out at this hour? He grumbled to himself, thinking it must be some kids playing a prank. He shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. Standing on his porch was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with big, dark eyes and hair the color of midnight. She was wearing a simple, old-fashioned dress despite the biting cold. But what struck Arthur as truly odd was that she was holding a small, empty, wicker basket. He opened the door a crack. "Can I help you, little one? Are you lost?" The girl looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Her voice was as soft as a whisper, almost carried away by the wind. "Do you have any candy?" she asked. Arthur was taken aback. It wasn't Halloween. "Candy? Child, it's a bit late for that, isn't it? Where are your parents?" She just stared at him, those big, dark eyes never blinking. "Just one piece," she repeated, her voice eerily calm. "I'm so hungry." Something about her made Arthur's heart ache. Maybe she had run away from home. Against his better judgment, he went to his kitchen pantry and found an old tin of butterscotch candies he kept for his grandkids. He picked out a single, golden-wrapped piece. He returned to the door and handed it to her. Her fingers were ice-cold as they brushed against his. "Here you go," he said gently. "Now, you should really get home." The girl didn't say thank you. She simply placed the candy in her basket, turned around, and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the street. Arthur watched her go, a strange feeling of unease settling over him. He locked his door, something he rarely did, and went to bed, trying to shake off the encounter. The next night, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. The same time, the same soft sound. Arthur knew, even before he looked, who it would be. There she was, the little girl with the empty basket. "Do you have any candy?" she asked, her voice the same quiet whisper. This time, a shiver ran down Arthur's spine. "You were here last night," he said, his voice a little shaky. "You need to go home. This isn't right." "Just one piece," she insisted, her eyes fixed on his. "Please." Arthur was a kind man, and the thought of a hungry child, no matter how strange, was too much to bear. He sighed, retrieved another butterscotch candy, and gave it to her. Once again, she took it without a word, placed it in her basket, and vanished into the night. This continued for a week. Every night, the same knock, the same girl, the same question. Arthur's unease grew into genuine fear. He started asking his neighbors if they'd seen a little girl wandering around at night. No one had. He called the local sheriff, who told him there were no reports of a missing child. Arthur began to notice other things. The flowers on his porch started to wilt and turn brown. A deep, unnatural chill seemed to have permanently settled in his house, no matter how high he stoked the fire. He felt tired, drained, as if some vital energy was being slowly siphoned away from him. On the 8th night, Arthur decided he'd had enough. When the knock came, he didn't answer. He sat in his armchair, heart pounding in his chest, pretending he wasn't home. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. Then, a little louder. Knock, knock, knock. Arthur squeezed his eyes shut. Then he heard her voice, no longer a whisper but a clear, cold sound that cut right through the wood of the door. "I know you're in there. I just want one piece of candy." He didn't move. The knocking stopped. Arthur let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He thought it was over. But then, he heard a new sound. A faint scratching, like fingernails dragging slowly, deliberately down the outside of his door. The scratching went on for what felt like an eternity. Arthur was paralyzed with terror. Finally, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying. He stayed in his chair all night, too afraid to move, until the first rays of morning sun streamed through his window. When he finally gathered the courage to open his door, he gasped. Etched into the wood were deep, jagged scratch marks, spelling out a single, chilling word. Hungry. Arthur was a changed man. The color drained from his face and his hands trembled constantly. He stopped leaving his house altogether. He boarded up his windows and triple-bolted his door. He told anyone who would listen about the girl, but they just looked at him with pity, thinking the old man had finally lost his mind. A few weeks later, a young couple, the Millers, moved into the house across the street from Arthur. They were new to Oakhaven and didn't know its stories. One night, Mrs. Miller was up late with her newborn baby when she heard a soft knock at her door. Curious, she looked through the peephole. She saw a pale little girl in an old-fashioned dress holding an empty basket. The girl looked up, as if she knew she was being watched, and whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you have any candy?" Mrs. Miller, feeling a mix of pity and concern, opened the door. "Oh, you poor thing. You must be freezing," she said. "Come on in for a moment and I'll find you something." From his window, barricaded behind planks of wood, Arthur watched in horror. He saw the Miller's front door open. He saw the little girl step inside. And then he saw the lights in the house flicker and die, plunging the home into total darkness. He never saw the Millers, or their baby, ever again. The house across the street now sits empty, a dark and silent monument on the edge of town. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, the remaining residents of Oakhaven swear they can hear a faint, soft sound echoing through the streets. Knock, knock, knock. They say she still wanders, forever searching. They say she's not looking for candy, not really. She's looking for a way in. She's looking for a home. She's looking for a family to call her own, even if just for a little while. And all she needs is for you to open the door. What would you do if you heard that knock? It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That a simple act of kindness could be an invitation for something far, far older and hungrier than you could ever imagine. Thanks for tuning in to our story tonight. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that will make you think twice before answering the door. Stay safe and always check the peephole.